I noticed that one. They really taste so different today. Do you guys think so too? There's so much raspberry compote coming out of that wine, in addition to the graphite and the black sesame seeds, and there's a lot going on in that wine. It's really exciting today. I love the grippiness of it. Okay, let's go ahead to Greg.
First of all, I love that Gillian just lived away and came back with cash. I don't know if you did just that, but like, I'm assuming I can unbutton your shirt. I mean, I'm not sure what, but it's all good. I'm open.
I think it's the whipped cream.
Thank you all again for being here. This is super fun for us. Something about, we all have a lot of backstory together. And some of which we'll repeat, some we won't. But when Adam was referencing Winecast and proposing there, it's a very special spot. And this is some backstage insider baseball trivia that our logo is taken from the ceiling of Winecast. And it's tattooed on me too. But it's a really special incubator in Santa Barbara. So the fact that pivotal moment in his personal life happened there is really deep. It's cool, and it shows his commitment to the area that he's had for decades, which is really, really awesome. As has the Jackson family. Right, so I'm an LA kid, but being a Santa Barbara boy professionally, seeing people planting their own flags and roofs and committing to our area has been so meaningful. It's beyond flattering to do that. It's like, whoa, these entities are all in to this landscape, and it's a very, very, it's a powerful thing. Be it the Jackson family, the Lee family, et cetera, schools. So here's this, Santa Rita Hills from us. This is all estate. So the thing about Brooklyn, real quick, is that, and Adam touched on a little bit with stems, California can be very forthright with fruit. And fruit's beautiful, and fruit in California can be super generous. And so I see shapes in my head. It's a little silly, with a compliment or something. But I see California Pinot, certainly Santa Rita Pinot, being very round and circular. Stem inclusion is more Cartesian, it's more square. Big, beautiful curves on a body, and a corset. Yeah, it's more cinched up, it's more savory, and there's a tea-like, savory, soy, poison underpinning, and you're nodding, thank you both, gold stars for you too. But that does that, and there's an opportunity to play in that world in Santa Rita Hills in particular. And Jonathan might touch on that too, because he works with the Valley. It's like the juxtaposition of Santa Maria and Santa Rita, and affinity for STEM participation. But with this kind of reined-in thing, it's like a softer protein, like a scallop or ahi or something. It's great raw, right? And that's kind of usually my jam. But when you sear it, you're not cooking or even warming it hardly, but you're compartmentalizing that flesh. Yeah, and that's kind of what stem inclusion does. So when you have this wine, Adam's wine, this wine, be reflective of that, and then think about what that savory element does with food, right? It's a condiment. Right? Fruit and food can clash a lot. Yeah, but if there's black tea, if there's soy, if there's that herbal savory element, what does that do? It just lifts and enhances yet beneath the plate, and it sets the plate up for success. So the food pairing with these wines is bananas. There's nothing that you couldn't have with these, in my eyes.
Yeah, it's such a cool commentary, and as we've been going through this week, we've all been recognizing the sheer amount of umami that's displayed in these wines is really thrilling. There's umami in all wine, right? It's just sometimes fruit or baby fat is hiding it. And so that savory element is in all wines, glutamates, right?
And also, real quick, is that the Nielsen, it's a snappier, tart food profile. Picking a bit earlier, it's fresher as pomegranate, it's crunchier. The Siduri and the Brooklyn wine, were brought in a little bit later in the season. These are really, really big Pinots, right? So you think, oh, big Pinot, what does that mean? It's like fruit and kind of obvious come hither stuff, but it's not, is it? Yeah, there's tons of power, but it's been harnessed by appellation and clone and execution and stem inclusion in varying degrees, obviously, in the two wines, but it's an interesting aesthetic to consider.
So you mentioned, Greg, that you're from LA, and that kind of wine gravitated to that Santa Barbara area. Why did you pick and map out that you did with Santa Rita?
Yeah, well, I'll do it fast because I don't want to chill everyone. But yeah, so I grew up in LA, went to school at UC Santa Barbara, taught French there. My first foray into wine was a tasting room job when I was 21, part-time job. I didn't know Chardonnay was great. I certainly do now. Chardonnay every day. Every day was Chardonnay. Every day was Chardonnay. That's my next hat if I have more room on my body. Yeah, it's loud and clear now, folks. Yeah. No, tasting room gig, and then I was 21 years old. You know, one day behind the bar, I fell in love with this whole thing, and here we are. So that's my life story in a nutshell. But I was just kind of, you know, some people are just born in certain areas, and then you either you leave and retreat and find your own thing, and or you settle in to that. So, you know, very different, you know, more profound way. Chris, you know, it's Chris's world, but I too was kind of just born there, and I've always stayed. And I'm very provincial and proud, and that's kind of part of like the French background of mine, of being very kind of defensive of place.
Okay, let's check out any questions, comments. So are you noticing a thread in the ones? Right, this like really firm lacing of acidity, and also a lot more than just fruit. Okay. Let's talk about Julia's, Jill.
Right, so yep, Julia's Vineyard in the glass, so named after Chris's sister. She was with us in the beginning, part of the trip, and so next time you'll meet her. We haven't really talked about the comparison of actually Greg's wine and our wine. So you have Santa Maria Hills, and then you have Santa Maria Valley. He does a lot of whole cluster. We actually do 0 whole cluster right now, maybe experimenting in the future, but a lot of that equates to some of our vine age, so a lot of older vines out there, and a lot of clone 4, so that's the larger portion of this blend. Right now, I'm the only winemaker that sources from one vineyard, and I make 9 different Pinots, actually, plus the rosé that you guys had walking in, so that was another expression of Julia's Vineyard, a couple different clones, whole cluster pressed. And it's very easy to make different Pinots off the ranch because of, you know, back to the different soil types, vine age, clones. I mean, some of the root stocks are unrooted, or back Cabernet root stocks with Pinot and Chardonnay planted. Then there's a couple blocks that are all clone 4, same vine age, but different flavors, and that kind of equates to that soil type. And so it's really fun for a winemaker to. We bring in all the blocks in separately, ferment separate, age separate, and then we have, you know, spice racks of things to kind of put together a perfect blend. And really the experience that we have in the vineyard, we keep talking about how our area is very stark and the wind and the fog and it's cold, and when it's also very beautiful. So I sometimes still mesmerized on my drive in, and Santa Maria is very majestic. I used to source from vineyards in Santa Rita Hills. I actually live in Los Alamos, and there is that common wind factor and just beauty. I go wine tasting on the weekends, yes, to, you know, say hello to friends, but also just to drive out on Santa Rosa Road just because I love that road. Again, I actually got married on that road too, so again, the personal, I think we are just putting our roots into Santa Barbara, and Chris, get used to me, I'll be around for a while.
Yeah, we were joking yesterday because you know, Julia had been with us on the tour, and we were saying, you know, Chris, you make a good-looking woman, but your sister handled that for you nicely. And you know, will you stand up, please? Just stand up for a second. I want everybody to see. Okay, Jess Jackson was a tall man. Look at this guy.
We're not going by height today, for sure.
You know, the other thing, Jill, is you really pointed out to us over the course of the trip, and I think it's absolutely true. The spice profile in this wine is on display, big time. And I hope you guys are picking that up. That's really quite unique to Santa Maria.
So I'm going to give a little plug here, just because I think that this area deserves the attention. It's a little bit off the beaten path, right? So it doesn't get quite the same amount of traffic as other areas. But when Joe was talking about how stark and how beautiful it is, I mean, it's just golden, you know, marine soils, stark, windy, beautiful in the same way that a beautiful desert would be beautiful. And if you go out there, it really is spiritual in a sense. It's a special place.
Yeah, very much so. It doesn't look like other wine regions, but it is spiritual, absolutely. Let's go ahead and get to your wine, Jonathan.
Okay. So this is a 2016 Nielsen Vineyard. The Nielsen Vineyard is where the Byron wine is actually located. It's very sandy soils. But where we sourced for this vineyard designated wine is actually a section that's got outcroppings of shale and limestone. And we always kind of have, along with the Chinese 5 spices, have a little bit of a graphite characteristic to it. And I think it's where we're sourcing from it. And since it's our own vineyard, we actually come through and do something a little bit different where when the grapes are turning color, when they're going from green to red, when there's about 5% of the clusters that have turned red, we'll get our vineyard team to come through and actually drop those 5% clusters because they're starting to mature faster than the other portions. And then, this is more common, when it's 95% red, whatever is green is behind, so we drop those. So we get this really uniform expression of our vineyard, and it tends to be a little more concentrated, a little more, have a little more oomph to it. We specialize in vineyard designated wines in Santa Maria Valley and Santa Rita Hills. That's kind of Byron going back to its roots, because back in the day when Ken Brown started, he was buying grapes from Sierra Madre in Santa Maria Valley and buying grapes from Sanford and Benedict, yet to be Santa Rita Hills, blending the two and hanging our hat on the Santa Barbara County. So for us, going out and sourcing some of the best vineyards, starting with our own Nielsen Vineyard, we also make a Julia's Vineyard. But it's been really awesome to, kind of understand the two regions that we're focusing on, Santa Rita Valley, Santa Rita Hills, and putting that in the context of Santa Barbara. A little bit about whole cluster, we completely descend this because we're going for that expression of sight, expression of fruit. But yesterday we were kind of talking about it and having, 5 vineyards in Santa Rita Hills and 4 in Santa Maria Valley. If I was going to err on adding whole cluster to Santa Rita Hills, it was always, yes, that's going to be beneficial for the Santa Rita Hills wines. They tend to be big, and Greg did a really good job defining their expression. But it's funny that in Santa Maria Valley, where you have some more earthy tones and very silky tannins because of the sandy soils there, if I were going to err on whole cluster, it's usually the wrong decision. We do have 2 vineyard designated wines to share for you guys, with you guys afterwards. And I think it's kind of interesting. It's Fiddlesticks Vineyard, which is in Santa Rita Hills. We chose not to use any whole cluster in that one. It's our only Santa Rita Hills wine that is completely destemmed, but it's because the soil there is so interesting. So we just wanted to really express that in the wines. And then next to it is the Biennacido Q Block. And that's the only wine in Santa Maria Valley that we do add whole cluster to. And it's because it's old vine Pomard and really savory and has tons of structure. So kind of we get to showcase the oddballs in our portfolio, but they're really fun wines. And just excited that Byron is part of this whole journey and the pioneering spirit of Uriel Nielsen and Ken Brown to be grafted into the Jackson family. It's just exciting, and I'm excited to see where Byron even progresses from that. That was just his tenet, is making world-class wines, but he also said, we get better every year. So I'm looking forward to making world-class wines and getting better every year.
Fantastic, yeah. And do you guys notice a bit of a difference in this wine? No question, right? More black fruits, would you agree? A little bit more muscle. And what's interesting about it is if you look at this map here, the bench that they're referring to, which is this long section here, it's one of the most profound cru in California. If you think about where cru can be found, there's Hirsch, there's certainly a lot of different places throughout Napa, but this is a venerable cru, and even though there's some uniformity in the soils, right, in terms of where they lay as a wash that came down the hills, remember, as you go east to west, west to east, that's what I mean, it gets warmer because the fog penetration peters out. So you can think about the diversity on this bench into itself. His wine is not that much farther from Cambria. And it's just those several degrees of warmth where you start to see differentiation. And as we drill down into our cruise, this is where it gets exciting. Okay, let's go ahead and go back to one of these slides here. I think we do need to talk about growing days, right? So let's go ahead and take a whack at this, guys. This is a really important slide. Anyone?
I'll start out. When you look at this and you see that Santa Maria is at the bottom of the list with the highest number of days, that's the most critical component or factor to this whole region down in Santa Barbara. What's going on there is that in a normal year, as an example, bud break is mid to end of February, maybe in a late year, the beginning of March. Up say Monterey or the North Coast, it's not going to be for another month after that. So the season gets a very early start, and then since it is so cool from the effect of the ocean and the fog and the breezes, and the fog, of course, is there in the morning, and it kind of slows down the photosynthetic effect and causes you to have a longer growing season. It takes, with that longer growing season, which is what's the magical part to this whole region, is, we say the longer it takes to get a grape ripe, the more the natural acid is retained, higher natural acid, the more the flavors are developed to the nth degree. With red wines, the more the tannins are matured, the seeds are matured, the stems are matured for use in fermentations for reds. But you have that great flavor component. And the other thing that really helps to gain that long season is the fact that, so we call the diurnal temperature, daytime to nighttime. It's a very narrow band and very calm. And so that helps to add to that length of the season versus, say, going up north where you might have these 90, 95 degree temperatures. You don't usually have that in the Santa Maria Valley ever, and it's maybe not much lower than 50 at night. Where up north it can get into the 40s. So that narrow bandwidth, the fact that it starts early because it's a more temperate, sort of calmer winter climate, but then that coolness continues through the season. That's what makes this the chosen spot on earth, really, for these great wines, and for why we're all there and in love with it. It's that 200 days of beautiful growing.
We have a question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, would you say from vintage to vintage, you can pretty much stay consistent year after year? I mean, I know the temperatures change,
Right.
but is it consistently?
So
Does
the
that
question
create
is
consistency is the question.
From year to year, yes, it is. So what happens is sometimes we'll have an earlier year where bud break will be maybe the beginning of February or mid-February. It's still that same number, roughly the same number of days, but the harvest season starts earlier. If it doesn't, the buds don't come out until February, then we're going to have a later season more often than not. And what I didn't mention is the harvest period. So we're starting in late February with our bud break, and then harvest is not till October or the end of October. In fact, the Camelot, when we get to that Chardonnay, that's usually the last vineyard we pick in Santa Barbara County. So it's a really long season. So it's going to be this long of a season, regardless of where it starts usually down there.
But that also provides opportunity.
There's two things. Back to your question, it's a beautiful one. When you think about predictability, it usually is accompanied by what? Warmth or cold? Warmth, yeah?
Yeah.
Geographically?
Yeah.
This is predictable, cool. And that's rare.
And that
That's
was my
rare.
question.
Right.
Right? It's a very rare circumstance. Most Chardonnay and Pinot Noir areas that thrive are way more volatile when it comes to weather patterns.
Up and down, spikes.
They're beautiful. I mean, Oregon, Europe, all that epic, right? All day long. But we're blessed where we are. In my 27 years there, I've never been prompted to pick because of adverse weather, which is ridiculous in our line of work, right? And so, with that, you can be very vulnerable. You can be very deliberate with your hand, and you can be very calm with your hand. And so, if you have a more finite window of picking opportunity, sometimes decisions are hurried, and frequently they're more homogeneous. And I don't mean to sound dismissive, and I'm not. But a lot of areas are waiting for something to ripen. Hail's going to come. it's like playing chicken. We all pick on basically the same day. We bang it out, and in 10 days we're like hunting in the Rhone Valley. Truffle hunting. But in our case, it's like a my analogy isn't going to the panel probably, but like a tee ball on a tee. I mean, it's like there's no rush. There's no fastballs involved. Right? You can do whatever you want. It's a blessing and a curse. But if you get off on picking early because alcohol's an issue, you want to be low, and that's your jam, that's fine. You've got this long season to which Randy made reference. Middle's always the middle, it's like Goldilocks, it's always fine. But and if you play in like the kind of naughtier later season sandbox, as like Randy, Adam, and I at least usually frequent, we're those guys.
Yeah, we're the naughty ones.
We're the late ones. Randy even more than me, which is like always whoa, like. He's not worried, like, I'm good. He's not to take me deeper down that sandbox. But you can, because, all of us, most of us on the channel have picked Chardonnay in Santa Barbara in November. And that's unheard of. But there's acids ripping, weather's epic, flavors are developing. Like, why would you leave that on the table? Like, we typically don't. And that kind of expression is seen through these in particular, but Santa Barbara in general.
Let me toss this one other thing that I think is important from a buyer point of view. And I learned this, I was in retail before I started making wine. And the 1989 vintage came out, it was like 1991. And at that time, and I still unfortunately think it's true to this day, vintages by the press are written about based on what it's like up in Napa, in the North Coast. And at 89, oh, it's such a shitty vintage. It rained all the time, that kind of thing. And I remember tasting 89 All Blanc Clement Chardonnay, and I'm like, shit, this is great. This is wonderful. What happened? And so I learned the difference between North and South. And so as this goes forward, and as Santa Barbara becomes more and more present in